Hey everyone, welcome to this chess video. So in this video we will be talking about 7 ways to tell if your chess opponent is cheating. Now this is an interesting topic because of course like on chess.com, you're not allowed to talk about cheating in the general forums, but this is not chess.com, and so we are here to basically teach you how to protect yourself from these players. If you can identify your opponent is cheating, of course you can report them, and then you can get your rating points refunded, which helps save yourself. And even mid-game, if you suspect your opponent is cheating, you can start playing differently to try and, maybe make it more likely that they'll get caught and be from their reports later on. So let's get into it. Let's not waste too much time here. So first I have this very famous chess game. This is from International Master Christoph Salaki, German International Master. He's also Chess Explained on YouTube. Very good channel. I'll also link a video where he did when he played this exact game. I'll have that in the YouTube section there below, so you can check out this game on your own. But it's a really instructional game, and this isn't the only game we'll look at. We'll look at many different examples here. And so I thought for the 7 ways to tell if your opponent is cheating, it's not like a look for one of these, it's a let me see how many of these they meet. And if your opponent does maybe one of these things, maybe they're cheating, maybe not. But if they start committing 3, 4, 5 of these things at once, you might be very suspicious that your opponent is cheating. And so rather than list all 7 directly, I'm going to kind of bring them up as they come up. And you'll see a lot of overlap in these games, which is why I chose not to list them in exactly right chronological order right from the start. So the very first thing, it has to do with the opening. This might not look too intuitive, that's why I chose the start of the game. Usually chess cheaters will avoid the main lines. Usually they'll play some weird sideline. Oftentimes something unsound, maybe a gambit, maybe something that's decent but not really the best opening. In this case, we have a normal d4 opening. Our international master is playing a solid game. Our opponent starts knight f6, which is fine. And then already, move 2, we have the Budapest gambit, which is decent. It's a tricky opening. It's by no means worse, than some others. And of course, a lot of honest players will play this opening. But if you face an opening that's not so solid or a bit questionable, you might start to consider, is my opponent cheating? Especially when they start playing really well accurately. Now, the reason that a cheater is going to play an opening that's very weird is because if they play a mainline opening, there's a chance that their opponent, in this case you, will know a lot of opening theory. And if you're a cheater, you don't need to run into that. Why risk it? Why play something solid? You have a computer available. It's not ethical. It's not right. But you can play some dubious, crazy thing and maybe get away with it, more often than you should. So oftentimes, these cheaters will avoid the mainline stuff. Very rarely you'll see them play like a standard Queen's Gambit or some other mainline opening like the London system. They're much more likely to play something like the Budapest Gambit or anything with Gambit in the name for that matter. So the game starts off, it looks pretty normal, and Christoph Salaki plays this knight h3 sideline where this knight goes to f4. Oftentimes it's going to go to d5. We're all playing solid stuff here. He doesn't suspect his opponent is cheating yet, but just the fact that he's played this unorthodox opening as black, the potential cheater here, it'll be very obvious very shortly that basically this is not a fair game. And so they're going to play normally. All this looks pretty normal so far. And so as we progress through the game, I'll go kind of quickly through the moves here. There's a moment where you start to wonder, this is all logical. This move is very strange. From a human perspective, it's like, yeah, you're getting your queen to the attack. But what are you doing here? I mean, this queen is unjustified. It's here. An IM is not going to fall for this very simple mate threat. I mean, this is super, super obvious. And all you do to defend is you just play g3 as white. This is the most obvious move in the world for a high-level player. And this opponent here, I didn't even include the rating because they're a cheater. It's like 2,300. You don't get to that level by playing a simple one-move attack with the queen. So of course, you'll just play g3, and the queen goes back. And I mean, this just looks completely ridiculous. I mean, you go here and then you retreat. Like, it just makes no sense. It's a waste of time. If you provoked a real weakness, maybe there'd be a good gain in the fact that you helped them advance a pawn. But this pawn is a useful move for white. I mean, it stops this bishop really well. And it's not like, there's a light squared bishop for white. If they had a light squared bishop on the board, maybe they could take advantage of some of these weaknesses. But here, their bishop is gone. This g3 move isn't even a weakness. Like, it's just baffling. Like, why is this even played? It's just like a telltale computerish type move. And the more you start playing chess, the more you realize this computerish type moves you'll see. Which brings me to my second, one. So the first way that you could tell they're cheating is if they play unorthodox openings and try and avoid main lines. Well, the second one is if they have these really computerish moves. And we'll see these other type of moves that the more experience you get as a chess player, the more you start to recognize human moves versus moves that a computer is likely to play. And so, we play knight b5 as, white here, the international master. And of course they defend, and it looks fine. This all looks standard, nothing too out of the ordinary. But white is doing well, putting a lot of pressure on black. And now black plays this knight to a8. I mean, this just looks very strange. Like, I guess you could probably defend with the queen back to d8, defend this pawn. Maybe knight here is guarding the pawn. But this is just so passive to put your knight right in the corner. That's a very difficult move for a human to find. And, this is actually a blitz game this is from. So this is already, we had the queen move here to h4 and then back. Very suspicious. Now they bring the knight back. This is very suspicious again. I'm not going to show the entire game. Again, I'll have the link below for the people who want to check out the game later. But really, the whole game was kind of suspicious. And to make things worse, which is the next way that you can tell if your opponent is cheating, is their timing and moves. So if you're a normal chess player, you have to think of certain parts. And other parts are like automatic moves, like obvious recaptures. Or if you have one legal move, it's pretty easy. You're just going to make the move. But if you're a cheater, sometimes they're so blatantly obvious, they don't even realize they have one legal move. And they have to wait for the chess engine to load every single time. And it's really comical that you'll never see these players pre-move. Or you'll see them, like the most obvious recapture, they'll take 3-4 seconds per move. And like in the video, you could actually see black was playing every move in like 3-4 seconds. It would be like 1, 2, 3, move. 1, 2, 3, move. And it was so consistent. It was very obvious that it takes that long for this person to look at the chess engine, let it load, find the best move, play the move, and then come back. It's really just a waste of everyone's time when you're literally playing against a computer this way. Now, alright, so let me go back here. I'll zoom out my screen here so you can see what I'm looking at. And so I'll show, this is a fair game. I'm not going to show the game here. This game ended in a draw. It's a game I played yesterday. But here we can look at the moves. And so these little bars here, if you can tell, this is how long you spend on each move. And so this is a human game. My opponent was not cheating. I was not cheating. And we can see here, this looks very normal. We have some moves that are played very quickly. We have some moves that are played a little longer. Like here, it took 18 seconds. This one took 18 seconds. So there's some moves that are thinking. And there's other moves that are 1 second, 3 seconds. It's spread out. And if you just kind of glance, you can see that these are, some moves here, like this was 27 seconds, this is 16, and it's more inconsistent. As there's more difficult positions, the person has to think. But with a cheater, you'll see a lot more consistency. They won't have these long thinks, or they'll have really long thinks in odd positions that are very easy. So it's not really consistent to the human. And so looking at that in the analysis board after the game, you can get a better sense of if you think your opponent is actually cheating based on that. So okay, so let me go back to another game here, show something else. So in this thing here, what I'm showing, this is a friend of mine. We were playing an unrated game a long time ago. And so, again, this is fair. Nothing I'm suspecting here. But the reason I bring up this game is because a lot of people think the accuracy score, when you do the game report on chess.com, helps detect cheaters. It sort of can, but not the way that people are thinking, which is why I didn't include it in the list until now. Because you automatically think, this person got like 100% accuracy, they got 90% accuracy, they got 95%, some really high percentage. That doesn't really necessarily mean they're cheating. And this is a good example of that, because in this game, what ended up happening is my opponent blundered a pawn very early. We played a normal looking opening, and then very shortly after, they played some moves here. I actually played c5, which wasn't actually best. It was actually better to play d5, because this move is coming. Would have been better if I had played a line like this, and I probably would have been fine, just be a normal game. But okay, we both missed that. I played c5. They should have pushed instead, but okay, fine. The game went on, but what ended up happening was, after I captured here, they should have just captured with the queen. And if they capture on d4 with the queen, then it's just an equal game, and it looks pretty normal. But what ended up happening instead was they moved the knight back, and then I just have an extra pawn. Because I'm going to take here, they trade here on e7, Now they recapture, but, black is a pawn up now. And so now I just secure my knight, with this d5 move. And I have no problems whatsoever. And I converted this game, I was up a pawn, and I got like 91% accuracy. Now, of course, both sides were plain honest. There was no cheating here. But the reason I bring this example up is because one side blundered very early. And what that does is it makes the other side very likely to have a high accuracy normally. See, I was analyzing this game from Garry Kasparov just recently, and he had like 60% accuracy. He's a grandmaster. That was an amazing game, arguably a masterpiece. But that game was also extremely tactical, and the computer didn't always agree with the human approach that was played. To compare that to this game, where my opponent blundered very early, it's very easy for me to convert with high accuracy. And maybe another way to think of it is, like, let's assume your opponent just blundered their queen. Like, in this case, it was only a pawn. Like, okay, black is up a pawn, I converted, fine. But let's say your opponent blundered their queen before move 10. Well, continuing on, it's like any move that you play is winning. And so if any move you play is winning, it's very hard to blunder away back the advantage. You would literally have to blunder your queen just to go even again. So it's a lot easier to find good moves when you're already winning. And in this case, it was only a pawn that I grabbed on e4, but it was enough that already I'm ahead. So alright, so accuracy isn't really indicative of cheating, but accuracy in context, I think, is. Because if it's one game, it's like, okay, sure. But if we take a look at like an average, I'm going to pull up a profile here, someone that was caught cheating. We can take a look at their averages here. Just look at some of these games. Like in this game, they had 90.9% accuracy. That's pretty high. And then here they had 95.5% accuracy. Here they had 93.8% accuracy. Here they had 97.3%. This one was 98.7%. And here we have 94.9%. This is very comical. They're all over 90. This game is 98.4%. This one is literally 99.2%. It's like they don't get anything below 90. And this absurdly high accuracy, like even GMs don't do that. Because if you're playing people close to your level, you're going to have fluctuations. And so it's always going to be an up and down type thing. So one game is not really indicative of cheating. Maybe it's one side just blundered early. But when you're consistently getting so many games that are high, that's a lot more suspicious. And putting all these things together, you get more likely of thinking one side might be cheating more than the other. Okay, so now let's zoom back in here, and I'll show what I was showing here. Keep going along. So zoomed in right there. And so, take a look at another example where my opponent was banned for cheating. So this other thing here, again, I'll show the opening just to show another case where this is a very uncommon opening. Like, this opening was not normal. It's okay. I mean, the Van Greed opening is by no means crazy in one knight c3. But, it's very uncommon. And so already you could suspect that your opponent might be cheating. It's not indicative by itself, but it's an indicator. Now, I'd not seen this opening before. I took on d4, which is actually a mistake. Better was to just keep developing, just play knight f6. It's about equal. Okay, but I didn't know that at the time. I took the knight thinking, so what if they developed their queen to d4? Not a big deal. I'll just develop now and play a normal game. Already, I'm slightly worse. One of the drawbacks of, walking into these uncommon openings. But here, this is an interesting moment, because if you let the engine load, the very top engine move, the very best white could play, is actually g4. Not that intuitive. The second most common, not common, second most, best evaluation for white would be play pawn e4. Very strange. Both of them are provoking to hit my knight soon. So that's obviously kind of odd. These are uncommon moves from a human perspective, unless you had this really studied. The third best move for white is actually bishop to f4. So, of course, not wanting to be super obvious that this is a cheater and playing like g4, sometimes they'll play a normal-looking move. And so here, they played bishop f4, and the game continued. And it's like, okay, so in the game I didn't really think much of it. But looking at the analysis board, sometimes you can kind of realize when they play a move that's, sort of computers looking, but they try and disguise it, it doesn't really work. Statistically, they're going to give away things. And this is comical, because one of my other points, one of the other ways you can tell if your opponent is cheating, is if their ability doesn't really seem to match how they were playing throughout the game. And so that brings me to another point in this exact same game. So skipping ahead here, what would you play here? I mean, material's equal. I just played this move. You can tell the computer doesn't like it. So if you give this a good amount of thought, you would realize that knight captures e7 check is devastating, because I'm going to recapture my queen, and then bishop g5 would trap my queen. I would just be completely down here. I mean, my opponent is allegedly over 2,000. You would think they would see this. I mean, it's a pretty obvious check. You look at checks and captures first, and then my queen is trapped. I mean, that's pretty easy, I would think, for 2,000 to calculate. But what do they do instead? They just hang their bishop. They literally just give away the bishop, and then I take it, and so what? And then they play f4. And they literally just give away the advantage. There is nothing. And like, okay, that's uncharacteristic, and you might think that's strange. Well, the problem is, from a human perspective, you know, they do make mistakes, but not like hanging that and then playing super accurately. But oftentimes cheaters will try and lower their accuracy by doing that. It doesn't work long term, but that's an attempt they try. Later in the game, I made a very human mistake where I should have played d6. That would have been the best move. I'm like, okay, what did I play? Well, I played f6. Very simple. It looks like, doesn't look like it makes a difference. But the problem is, they play bishop to e4, and now we see the problem. Because the problem is, I kind of want to play g6, but I can't, because then this pawn is pinned, and I'm in very massive trouble here. And so you notice, well, okay, well, compare that to here. What's the difference? Well, if I play d6, and then they go here, now instead I play g6, and it's like, okay, this pawn is no longer pinned, because now I have this other pawn to recapture. And so it was more important to see back there that I had to advance the d-pawn. That's a very human, natural mistake. But of course, my opponent apparently calculated this all through, or more likely they had a computer do it for them. Because at this point, it was so obvious where they were playing very quickly, like they already knew this. And that's a very high-level thing to see. But this high-level thing to see is in the same game that they literally just gave up a bishop instead of trapping my queen. You know, very suspicious that they would do that, you know, if they were really of that level. You know, humans make mistakes, but not exactly in this way. So, you know, looking at another opening example here, you know, d4, d5 looks common here. Notice this uncommon thing. You know, Baltic defense is not unheard of, but it's rare to play bishop to f5 here. So that's, you know, another uncommon opening choice I will highlight. But skipping ahead to the relevant point, in this position here, you know, material is equal. I think their move looks okay. They played knight to h8. That looks fairly human because you're unpinning yourself. You know, material was equal. White was attacking black. Maybe they want to trade queens. Like, okay, sure. I mean, the knight move back is a bit strange, but it's not the end of the world. I'm going to retreat because I don't want to trade queens. I want to keep attacking. But then they play h6, which is like, okay, you know, I'll take the pawn. They're going to try and trade queens. That looks fairly normal. And like, okay, that looks pretty human so far. I'm going to bring my bishop back so I don't lose it. Okay, I don't want my bishop hanging. But now here comes a pretty strange looking move. Now they move the knight back. What is the purpose of this? From a human perspective, this looks so strange. You literally went back, then you come back, and now you go back to h8 again. And what is the knight doing in the corner? Like, if you were to think here, what move would you play? I mean, there's a lot of good moves, I guess. I mean, maybe you could advance on the queen side with a5. A really idea that I really like would be something like knight to e7, c8, and then d6 to try and, you know, block this, you know, strong d5 pawn. That's a nice logical knight maneuver. The problem with doing that right away is it would drop a pawn, you know, so you have to be careful. But, I mean, moves like this look very human. Like, this knight looks okay. Why would you come back to h8? Well, no surprise, that is the top computer move. So, like, a very strange thing, but oftentimes, you know, the post-game analysis moves will line up exactly. So that's another strange thing, you know. And so you look at some of these examples, and it's like, you know, it's very obvious when people are cheating, you know, which is discouraging, but it happens. So taking a look at another example here. This is another game here where it looked normal, and it started off pretty good. You know, this all looks very natural, but then the problem is, at this moment, I played a very small nuance. I played bishop to f5, and it's such a small detail. It's a very subtle inaccuracy. I should have developed the knight and played knight to c6. This would have been okay for me, and the game is about equal. And then maybe they could go like queen b3. I could maybe play e6. Maybe I could play queen b6. You know, there's all very good ideas here, but it's about equal. However, instead of that, what did my opponent do? They completely punished me. I got obliterated this game. Obviously an engine user, because I played this super subtle nuance, and they completely crushed me. You know, they played super accurately. You know, we ended up trading here. You know, every single move they kept putting pressure on me. Now they're ganging up on this knight. The game continues. I defend the knight. Now they're putting the pressure here on this pawn, which would, again, look at my rook. And it's like, I try and unpin myself because the pressure is just too great here. And so I play king d8. And of course the computer picks up that's a blunder because, well, now it blunders to this fork. And I mean, the whole game, they just completely destroyed me. They got like 90% accuracy. And I mean, all from that one little nuance at the start of the game. So that's another way you can tell is sometimes these computers, they just play so accurately. And, a human is very unlikely to capitalize on this. Like if you were to play bishop f5 here, it's a small dubious move. Like, okay, I can, improve for next time. But to be completely obliterated as fast as I was, that's a very computer-looking thing. Now, we can actually go to their profile here. It's the same one that I had shown earlier. And the reason why I do this is because when we say the 90% accuracy, you could see, like, it's the same one where it was all these 90s, and, they were caught within a month, so it's not like they got along, they didn't go too far, but it's just the fact that, all of these percentages in context, you can see, it's like, it's very comical almost how they think they can get away with it, like they won't get caught, like, they just don't understand that when you're scoring this high in the 90s, or they don't see how silly some of these super advanced moves look from a human perspective. It's so obvious that they're cheating, but, they don't always see it that way. But okay, continuing on. So another thing that happens sometimes, and this is actually very funny. So you play the game, and then you get into a position where I was completely better. So, probably they were playing an honest game so far. I win material with this fork. I play b4, forking material here, looks good. And I think they were either letting me win, out of the opening, not the whole game, but letting me get an advantage, or they were maybe playing honestly and then decided to cheat. I don't know. But it's like I was playing pretty well out of the opening, got a slight advantage, and then the game continues on, and I'll just skip ahead several moves where I kept my advantage, but now they play this very annoying move. So they play knight to c4, which the computer doesn't like because of one move, but this is very tough to spot from a human perspective. The reason why it's so tough is because this is a really nasty threat for me. I had to think a while on this move, because what are they doing? Well, with this move, you would have to calculate a lot. But basically, my queen and bishop, are in this idea where you're forking them with knight to c4. And it's like, okay, so I move my queen somewhere. But if I move my queen somewhere, they take my bishop anyway. I have to recapture. And now they hit me with this fork. And now I'm losing back material, plus some. And so, if I move the queen, this falls with check. And so I'm already getting crushed. And so this is such a hard move to see because there's so much to calculate. And so thinking a bit, I played a move the computer really liked, which is just sacrifice my rook for the knight, because I don't want to lose all this and go into all these problems. I'm just trying to barely hang on. The computer says it's brilliant, but that's just because it likes sacrifices. Really, I'm just trying to survive here. I mean, I'm up by 2. I can afford to give back the pawns. And so I give back the material, and I'm playing well positionally, I think. But then, of course, I'm not a computer. I play an inaccurate move the very next move, and I give away most of my advantage. It's actually better to push f5, but okay. And of course, the game continues. I get into some real trouble. Here towards the end game, very interesting moment here, which of course I want to bring up because again, it shows how they're cheating. I'm in time pressure in this situation. They're not. They have plenty of time. Very obviously, they have more material than me. So if you're cheating, what do they do? Well, they try and sometimes play these really dumb moves and hoping they can lower their accuracy percentage and disguise the fact that they're cheating. That really doesn't work, because what happens is, like here, it's so obvious. They play king f3. They're not in time pressure. I am. I mean, this is Zugzwang. I have to move my king over. Rook e1 is checkmate. Like, they've played super accurately afterwards. They were able to calculate all that knight c4 stuff that we looked at, and they completely outplayed me from then on. And it's like, okay, they even survived my brilliant move. Literally, the computer loved it. Well, apparently, they fought me down from my advantage, got me into the position was equal, and kept pushing. They're completely winning, and they don't spot mate in one. Okay, fine, humans make mistakes. They ended up getting it the next few moves later. They didn't play it then, but then they get rook e1. Okay, fine. So it took a few moves longer. Maybe someone could argue that a human missed that. Well, I have a better example. I'll show another example here where they're clearly trying to lower their accuracy. So, they played pretty normal looking. at the start, and then, of course, it starts getting kind of silly again. Marshall defense, very dubious. They're just giving white the center. They take, again, they're developing their queen out. Another unorthodox opening. So they move back, knight f3, very strange, and then they just let me get the center. They just play this knight here, I'm going to grab the center. They're gifting me the center. I mean, this is a very garbage opening for this level. Very suspicious when they start playing that. Again, cheaters like to avoid main lines. And so it's skipping ahead because we want to get to the end. So, here, very similar to the last game, how I know they're trying to lower their accuracy is because after I play this move, queen g1 is checkmate in 1. Okay, 1900 plus players should probably see this stuff. Or at least most of the time, right? Well, they're not going to lose the whole game, but they're going to try and delay and act like they don't see it. So they play this move, which, granted, after my king moves, the computer says this is mate in 5, so they didn't completely blow the game. But okay, they promote. So here I actually do something which sometimes I do, and I suspect someone is cheating. If they're really, a computer, you're not going to trick them. A human, maybe I can play for a stalemate tricks, maybe in this position. But against the computer, I figure I'm going to lose anyway. I mean, we're down by 18 points of material in this position. So sometimes I'll play an absurd move just to see how they react. And so I play queen c3 check. Obviously, my queen is hanging here. So what are they going to do? I mean, they're 1900 plus player. You should just snap this thing off, you would think. I guess in this case, that wouldn't work. Because then my stalemate tricks work. Haha, Eric Rosen stuff. This would be stalemate because the bishop controls this. A human may or may not fall for that. But of course the computer won't. And so computer plays queen e5, blocks the check. And then I move my king. I want to see if they take my queen. There's no stalemate now. If they want to take here, they can take. I still have a move. So, what's going to happen now? Well, eventually now they do take. So they're going to get checkmate, right? Queen g1. Looks pretty good. Well, no. Bishop g1. Just why? There's no point to bring your bishop here. If anything, this would confuse matters, and maybe I can hide behind the bishop or do some weird things and get stalemate. So obviously they're playing these very dumb moves just to try and lower their accuracy. That's actually not really going to work. Now, eventually they do checkmate. And it's like, okay, sure, they figured it out. But when they play moves like this, it just helps me that when I can report the game at chess.com, I can point out certain moves and go, this is very suspicious. Please look into this game. So, if we were to go here, so this is my profile, I want to show something. Of course, there's always this. Nice attention and detail there. Let's take a look at the games. Because if you look at ratings, there's one other thing that you can tell for other players who are cheating. Of course, my account is legitimate. But compare the ratings, because people who are cheating, oftentimes their other ratings are very suspicious, completely out of the ordinary. See, all of these are within a few hundred points. Puzzle rating is completely inflated, but, Rapid is in the 1900s. Okay, Blitz, 1600s. I actually dropped. I was over 1700, so okay, sure. I mean, that's within a few hundred points. Reasonable. My daily rating, roughly the same. It actually dropped some too. Yeah, it was over 1900, now 1800s. I'm sure I'll get it back. Not too worried. They're within a few hundred points. 1800, 1900. They're close. My bullet rating I almost never play, so that's a low sample size. We can discount that. But even 1500, that's reasonable. Most of the time with cheaters, you'll find that their blitz rating will be really low. Like, say they're 2000 in rapid and their blitz is 1000. Well, granted, people could be 1000, but not with a rapid rating of 2000. That's 100, not 100, that's 1000 gap. I mean, mine was just a few hundred, and so, of course, you have to check the sample size. You have to see how many games they played. If they've played like my bullet here, I mean, 300 games is not huge. I guess it's more than that because that's just wins. But, still, it's not a massive sample size. So, if they have a large sample size and there's huge gaps between ratings, you might want to be kind of questioning, is that account legitimate, or maybe they're cheating in one and don't have time to cheat in the other. Very common, they'll be really low, super low in Blitz and Bullet, because they don't have as much time to literally check with the computer. Which brings me to my next point, which is newer accounts. That's the obvious one. But if you have new accounts, it's very easy to tell that they're, an indicator they might be cheating, because, of course, they get caught. And so if their account gets banned, they have to open a new account. Of course, this account, I opened in 2017. Other players who've had their account for many years, it's very unlikely they're cheating, because they've had that account for a long time, and cheaters usually don't just decide to start cheating overnight. Usually these are recurring players who have to keep constantly creating new accounts. So just kind of going to a quick review. I almost realized I didn't enlarge the screen. Well, okay, I'll do that now. But yeah, so it's just the fact that, these players don't always understand these things. And so just kind of reviewing, the 7 things that you can tell people are cheating is, for one, if they have a newer account. 2, of course, the move timing, how long it takes. Are their moves consistent? Do they look like they're trying to, wait for the engine to load and then they never pre-move and never make the obvious recaptures? The third way is, compare it to the other ratings. If they have the other ratings here, like some of these really high ratings, some of these low ratings, you can tell that they're probably not playing, at least a bit more suspicious that they might not be playing fairly. And then the really surprising one, I thought, for me, is that they play uncommon openings. They avoid main lines. That's your fourth way you can tell, because oftentimes cheaters will avoid main lines. And then, of course, if a move seems very computerish, like if you keep moving a knight back, or putting in the corner, or just when you gain experience, certain moves just do not look human. Cheaters play that all the time. The other way, number 6, is the accuracy score in context. By itself, you could have a really high accuracy rating. But that's not one thing and all, but if they're playing that constantly, that's something to be suspicious of. If they never have an accuracy below 90%, that's very strange. Even a GM would probably have one day where they play off, or one tactical game where they score in 70s or 80s, whatever in the percentage. And then the last way you can tell is, the ability of just kind of making sense, of their moves doesn't match their ability. Obviously in the last example we had, my opponent missed mate and won several times, or they would do other moves which seem to lower their accuracy. That's not really consistent with the ability of, fending off brilliant moves and then surviving, but then you can't find checkmate in a few. So all of those things together, you kind of get a better sense of if someone is cheating or not. And of course, one thing that's nice about chess.com is, although cheating is not allowed in the public forums, there's a cheating club on chess.com. You can, by all means, create forums here. You can discuss. It is legal to talk about cheating in this club. So don't do it in the public forums, but you can do it in this club. So I'll leave a link to this club at the end. So you can do that. And then finally, if you think they're cheating, by all means, definitely report them to chess.com, and eventually they'll get caught. I'll also leave a link at the end. I'll send how to basically report someone on chess.com. They have a nice little step-by-step how to do that. So I'll include that for everyone as well. So I hope all these ways help you protect yourself against cheaters, and I will see you in the next chess video.